Hello, Year 12. Sorry I can't be with you today. Here is the lesson detail for the fourth and final part of our topic on biodiversity. Okay, and the title for this is looking at how we maintain biodiversity. So I'm going to run through some of the key tasks for this and share with you some of the links and the information that you need. And as I say, I'll set the tasks here. Any questions that you have on any of this, you can get in contact with me. I will be online, or you can drop me an email. So your first do now task, just to sort of set the scene for this, is just for you to kind of think about why biodiversity is important. This links back to our first week on this topic, looking at the subject of biodiversity. It is what it is, and why we think it's important to the planet. So write down what you think, and then what I'd like you to do is read through a particular section. Why does biodiversity matter? Okay, it's this part here on this leaflet. Okay, which I'm going to provide the link to in separately. Just try and identify the main reasons for maintaining biodiversity. There's a number that we're going to go through anyway, but I want you to have a read through yourself first of all. So pause the video at this stage, click on this link, and then go through and read that document, that part of the document. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go through the reasons that you've just found, okay, that you've just talked about, and put a little bit more detail, a little bit more flesh to those reasons. So the first thing is aesthetic reasons. Okay, so one of the reasons for maintaining biodiversity is for aesthetic reasons. So protection of the landscapes, which make them obviously look nicer. Okay, if that is the case, then tourism is a particular reason to do that, because people are more likely to visit areas which are rich in biodiversity and look nicer rather than areas that have been devastated. But obviously there is a balance to be had. Second thing is an ecological reason. Okay, so in order to maintain genetic resources, which are any material from the plants, from the animals, or from the microorganisms that are within the habitat that contain genes that we find valuable. So we might get products provided from the genetic resources from any of these, things like food and drink, clothing, medicine, renewable fuels that are produced by these organisms. Okay, so if we don't maintain those genetic resources, then we will run out of those things. So another thing is to protect species. So we've learnt before about interdependence and how all organisms are interdependent on others for survival. So the removal of one species may have a significant effect on others. Decomposers are a good example. Insect pollination is another example. Okay, so the loss of habitat for bees and the reduction in bee numbers has been a significant issue that has been discussed because of the impact that would have on all sorts of different species. So another task that you will need to do at this point, okay, is to watch this video, which is entitled "How Wolves Change Rivers." I'll post a link to it, and you can just search it up on YouTube anyway. Okay, it is a video talking about the impact on wolves, which are an example of a keystone species. Okay, I think it's in the Yellowstone Park in the US, where they were reintroduced into that area, and the impact that had on the levels of biodiversity. So what I'd like you to do is write down some examples of interdependence between different organisms that you see within this video. Okay. As I say, wolves are an example of a keystone species, so where many of the other species in an ecosystem depend on them, and without them, the ecosystem would change dramatically. So they are considered very, very important. So pause the video here, have a click on the link that I post, or search for this video and have a go at this task. Okay, looking back at some more reasons. Okay, one of the main things, obviously, to maintain biodiversity is for economic reasons. There's all sorts of reasons why maintaining biodiversity will have, or not maintaining it will have an economic impact. Okay, so there's a list of reasons here that I don't propose to read through. Okay, but on the next slide, you can use the information on the next slide to help you explain why they might have an economic impact. Things like monoculture and things like soil erosion and things like protection from against abiotic factors. Okay, so there are 7 different reasons there. So what I'd like you to, as I say, is think about the impact that they would have if there is a loss of those aspects due to biodiversity decreasing. These are the sort of information that would help you, so you could try and match up some of these. These are the actual impacts, so if you need to use these to help you, but have a look through and see what you understand, what you think would be the impact of each of these. Okay, so the question is, how can we maintain biodiversity and yet still provide, obviously, for a growing human population? We are increasing all the time. We need to provide for that increasing population, and yet there is a balance. And the way we do that is through conservation, okay, through conservation processes. So there are 2 types, what we call in situ, which is within the natural habitat. So projects that conservation projects that take place within where those animals or those species and plants and things would normally be, things like wildlife reserves or marine conservation zones. And then we have ex situ, so that is outside of the natural habitat. So things like botanic gardens, seed banks, captive breeding programs, zoos and that sort of thing, where the species has been taken from its natural environment and is being bred or being cared for, that kind of thing, within a different environment. Usually ex situ is in addition to situ measures. So a lot of these captive breeding programs work with, for example, wildlife reserves and that kind of thing to be able to then reintroduce or provide support those kind of things. Okay. So you need to understand the difference between these 2 and the impact that they will have. We're going to look at them in a bit more detail. So, as I say, in situ conservation, we're talking about either wildlife reserves, which are protected areas. We control the grazing, we restrict human access, control poaching and feeding and culling, or the removal of invasive species. So there is a kind of a protected area that is looked after, and also the similar sort of thing in the water. So that's a marine conservation zone. So where human activities such as fishing are controlled. Okay, so there's not unlimited. There may be some fishing, but there's not unlimited fishing in order to maintain the diversity. Somewhere like the Great Barrier Reef is a good example of a marine conservation zone, which has been very, very damaged by trawling and tourism and that sort of thing. So there is restrictions on that now. So your task here is to find, and you can do this after this kind of you've been through this presentation, is for you to find out about the nearest wildlife reserve and marine conservation zone to you in Haverhill, basically. So there's a couple of links there about wildlife trusts, marine protected areas, and RSPB reserves and things. So find out about what it is, what species are being conserved there, where it is, what they do, that kind of thing. Okay, just to sort of give you a bit more information about the sort of things that happen. So if we then mention ex situ conservation, so particularly thinking about the botanic gardens, so which are so there's an example obviously in Cambridge University. They're basically plant species are managed to provide them with the resources to grow. So plants that would otherwise not grow in that habitat, they might be from tropical or very desert area, any other areas around the world, but there's only a small percentage of the plant species that grow that are currently being conserved. So it's very, very limited. Also things called seed banks, which is where seeds are dried and stored below freezing to remain viable, so they're able to germinate at a later date. So it doesn't work for all plants because obviously some seeds will die when they are frozen, but a lot will survive and can then regerminate. So they will keep them and they would have the potential then to release those back out or to grow new plants that potentially become extinct. And then obviously captive breeding programs is the other thing that we mentioned. So there is a video here for you to do to look at a captive breeding program at Chester Zoo. So I'd like you to stop the video at this point again and watch this piece of information about conservation breeding. I will again post the link. There's 4 questions for you to answer. So what is Chester Zoo's mission? Okay, what is their purpose? What are the 3 purposes of the conservation breeding programs? Okay, why do animals need to be genetically diverse, and how do zoos maintain genetic diversity? So have a look at the video, answer those questions. And then we're looking at referring back to our stuff that we did on the first week. So on the first week, the topic, you were asked to select a site for a new zoo in Cambridgeshire. And it's now time to decide which animal you choose to add to your zoo. Okay, you can pick several, but we want to have at least one. So what you need to do is to use this link to look at the red list of threatened species and choose one, or at least one, that you think would be suitable and would be the right animal for you to have, or the right species, sorry, for you to have in your zoo. So you need to identify the name of the species, whether the species is vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, or extinct in the wild. Give reasons why you've chosen this species from the information provided on the website. Okay, so just to add a bit of context to the sort of information you've looked at already. And then your last kind of research task, and this is sort of about more about policy and that kind of thing, and government procedures and agreements. So there are 3 main conservation agreements that have been kind of put around that cover biodiversity, maintenance of biodiversity, conservation projects, that kind of thing. They're called CITES. They are the Rio Convention and the Countryside Stewardship Scheme. Okay, so what we'd like you to do for that is to create maybe something like a Venn diagram to show the main points of each conservation agreement and the similarities and differences between each. Okay, so you know how a Venn diagram will work. So things that are similar will cross over, things that are different put them on their own. There is some information in the textbook on pages 298 and 299 to help, but the sort of things that you need to be looking at is whether they are international or national projects, what their aims are, whether they include action on climate change, whether they publish the red list, which is the thing I just mentioned about threatened species, and also how they respond to kind of making conservation a part of normal farming practice. Okay, so those are the things to look out for. You might find some other things that you think are important, okay, and add those to your Venn diagram to get an idea of the differences and the similarities between policies. Okay, that is all of the work for this week and obviously next week, taking us all the way up to the end of term. That will be, won't be sending any more new work, okay, for now. I'll give you a chance to kind of get through and catch anything up. If you do have any questions at all, then please do get in touch and let me know. Okay, just work through this, as I said, at your own pace, and see how you get on. And that covers kind of all of the biodiversity topic for this term. Okay, and I will see you all soon.